My name is Chloe Ashford. I'm 34 years old. The night I found my husband and my best friend tangled together in our bed, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw a single thing across the room. I picked up the aluminum baseball bat leaning against the shoe rack, walked back into the bedroom, and brought it down on her legs 6 times. 3 on the left, 3 on the right. Fair's fair. Then I called 911 and turned myself in. I lost everything: my house, my cars, the company I'd built with my own 2 hands. I refused every deal, every offer, every olive branch they held out to me. I traded 3 years and 8 months of my life so that she would spend the rest of hers in a wheelchair. The day they let me out, the March rain had just stopped, and a thin seam of sunlight pried the gray clouds apart. A man was standing outside the prison wall, a huge bunch of sunflowers clutched to his chest, the stems still crusted with dirt. His eyes were red, but he was smiling. He said, "Chloe, I've waited a long time for you. Let's go home." By the time I was 30, I'd built a logistics company at the Port of Seattle out of nothing but cold mornings and sheer stubbornness, buried both my parents, and married a man I was certain was the safe choice. People who knew me back then all reached for the same word: calm, steady. A woman who never lost her temper, never raised her voice, never let anyone see the seams. I'm telling you this in my own voice because I'm the only one left who'll tell it straight, the whole thing, beginning to end, including the parts that put me in a cell. I don't need your forgiveness. I just want you to understand how a calm woman ends up standing over her best friend with a baseball bat on her own wedding anniversary. It all started the way most of these things do, with a key and a door someone left unlocked. I remember the date exactly because it was our anniversary. 3 years to the day. A big shipping contract down at the Port of Seattle had cleared its final payment early that afternoon, so I skipped the 4 o'clock meeting and drove over the bridge into Bellevue to buy the Rolex my husband had been dropping hints about for half a year. Tom had a way of wanting things out loud without ever asking for them directly. A watch in a magazine left open on the counter. A brand name mentioned twice in one dinner. I'd learned to read him like a shipping manifest. The girl at the counter wrapped the box in navy paper and tied the ribbon with 2 neat pulls. "Is this for your husband?" she asked. "It's our anniversary," I told her. She smiled and wished me a happy one. For a moment, standing there under the bright store lights with the little bag looped over my wrist, I actually felt happy. Light, even. That's the part I come back to. How light I felt. The rain started somewhere around Factoria, the fine gray mist that Seattle does better than anywhere on Earth, not really falling so much as hanging in the air, beating on the windshield until the wipers dragged it away. I thought about stopping for flowers. I decided against it. Tom was a practical man. He liked things that were useful. Flowers died in a week. A Rolex kept its value. That was how he thought, and after 3 years, I had started to think that way too. Later, much later, I would understand what practical really meant with him. It meant that every time my company signed a contract, he smiled with his mouth and not his eyes. It meant the offhand jokes times, "You're the breadwinner, honey. I just carry the groceries," times that I mistook for humor. I thought he was proud of me. It took me a long time to understand that a certain kind of man cannot stand next to a woman who doesn't need him, and that the not needing is a wound that never scabs over. He didn't marry me because I was strong. He married me hoping to find out that I wasn't. I didn't ring the doorbell when I got home. I had my key. I wanted to surprise him. The porch light was off. The living room was dark. Outside, the rain had picked up, tapping on the roof in a soft, uneven patter. I assumed he was out. Then I heard the sound. It was coming from the bedroom. I will never forget those few seconds as long as I live. It felt like someone had split my skull down the middle. One half of my brain was telling me exactly what that sound was. The other half was fighting, with everything it had, to deny it. I stood in the hallway, my hand closing hard around the little bag with the watch inside it, and I walked toward the door one step at a time. The bedroom door was open, a crack, not locked. When I pushed it open, I saw two bodies, tangled together. The man's face I knew too well, 3 years of sleeping beside it. But it was the woman's face, the one that turned toward me, that hit me like a live wire and left me frozen in the doorway. Tracy, the best friend I'd grown up with. We'd lived a block apart. In high school, we'd shared a locker, shared clothes, shared a single umbrella walking home in the rain. She'd been my maid of honor. She'd held my hair back the night I got too drunk at my own bachelorette party. I'd lent her money more times than I could count. When her father landed in the hospital the year before, I hadn't hesitated for a second. I wired her $15,000 that same afternoon. And now she was scrambling upright, naked, off of my own bed, her face sliding from ecstasy into pure horror. "Chloe, why? Why are you home?" Tom frowned and pulled the sheet over his lap. His first reaction wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. "You said you had a meeting tonight." And there it was. He wasn't asking why I'd come home. He was blaming me for ruining his plan. That was the moment something in my head just switched off. Not exploded. Switched off. The way a breaker trips and a whole floor of a building goes dark at once. The rain, the breathing, the blood moving in my own ears, all of it went quiet. I felt myself step backward out of my own body and float up into the corner of the ceiling, and from up there I watched a woman in a rain-damp coat stand very still in the doorway. She looked calm. She looked like she had all the time in the world. I turned and walked back into the living room. My steps were steady. The aluminum bat was leaning against the shoe rack by the door. Company softball league, the summer before. It still had the sticker on the barrel. I'd never once swung it. I picked it up. The alloy was cold in my palm. Behind me, I could hear Tracy scrambling into her clothes, and Tom hissing under his breath. "Go, go, get out. She's lost her mind." Times I walked back into the bedroom. Tracy had her dress halfway up her thighs. When she saw what was in my hand, the blood drained out of her face. "Chloe, let me explain." She backed away until her legs hit the frame of the bed. I didn't say anything. I crossed the room and stood over her and looked down. I had looked at that face for 26 years. I raised the bat. The first swing landed on her left knee, and in the same instant the bone cracked. A picture went off in my head like a flashbulb. 12 years old, skipping my own lunch for a week to scrape together the money for a field trip she couldn't afford because her family had nothing. She'd cried and told me that someday, when we were grown, whatever good fortune I had, she'd share in it too. Second swing. The outside of the left knee. Second flashbulb. 20 years old, her small business underwater, and me lying awake for 3 nights straight, calling everyone I knew until I'd pulled together $15,000 to cover her father's hospital bill. She held my hand in that fluorescent hallway and swore she'd owe me for the rest of her life. Third swing. The tendon behind the left calf. Third flashbulb. My wedding day. Her in the maid of honor dress, drunk and grinning, her arms slung around my shoulders. "Chloe, you're the closest thing to a sister I've ever had." And that picture folded over onto the 2 bodies I'd just found in my bed. She couldn't scream anymore. Her mouth just hung open. I switched sides. I moved to her right. Tom lunged and grabbed my arm. "Chloe, stop it right now. You'll go to prison for this." I threw him off. He stumbled and went down hard on the floor. Fourth swing. The right knee. 2 sharp cracks, like dry branches snapping. Fifth. Sixth. 3 on the left. 3 on the right. Fair's fair. I say times fair's fair, but there was no arithmetic in my head at the time. My hands were doing the counting. I was still up in the corner of the ceiling, watching. Later, people would ask me what I was thinking in that moment. I told them the truth. I wasn't thinking anything at all. I dropped the bat. It hit the hardwood with a bright, ugly clatter. I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel triumphant either. What I felt was empty, the specific emptiness of a person who has just finished burying something that lived inside her chest for 26 years. That friendship had died under my hands, and I knew, standing there, that it was never coming back. Tracy lay crumpled on the floor, both legs folded at angles legs aren't supposed to fold, and then she passed out. Tom sat pressed into the corner, shaking from head to foot, his lips moving without making a single whole word. I took out my phone, unlocked it, dialed 3 numbers. 911? Yes. 214 Cedar Ridge in Somerset, up in Bellevue. I've just badly injured someone. Yes, I'm the one reporting it. I'll be right here, waiting for you. I hung up and went and sat down on the living room couch. On the coffee table was the mug of black coffee I'd made that morning before work. Long cold now. I picked it up and took a sip. Bitter. It's a strange thing, the mind, in a moment like that. I didn't think about prison or about what my life had just become. I thought about the couch I was sitting on, how Tom and I had argued for a week over the color before we bought it, how I'd given in on the gray because it wasn't worth the fight. I thought about the anniversary dinner reservation I'd have to cancel, and then I almost laughed, because of course I would. I thought about the fact that the bedroom I'd decorated, the sheets I'd picked out, the whole life I'd assembled, piece by careful piece, had been the stage for this. You spend years building something, brick by brick, and it turns out the people inside it were just waiting for you to leave the house. My hands were still shaking. Not from fear, from the adrenaline that hadn't burned off yet. I looked down at my palm. A few drops of blood had landed there. Not mine. I took the little navy bag with the Rolex out of my coat pocket. I turned it over in my hand once. Then I dropped it in the kitchen trash. Somewhere far off, sirens started up, threading through the rain, getting closer. I stood and opened the front door. A few neighbors had cracked their doors down the hall to watch. I stood in the doorway with a blank face and waited. When the officers came up the stairs, I raised both hands over my head. My name is Chloe. I'm the one who called. She's in the bedroom. Go ahead. As they cuffed me, I glanced back once. At the end of the hall, Tom came staggering out with a towel around his waist, shouting at the police. She attacked her. It was deliberate. She's insane. She's out of her mind. I looked at him. I had looked at that face for 6 years. 2 years chasing me, 1 year dating, 3 years married. And now it was like looking at a total stranger. No, that's not right. You don't feel nauseous looking at a stranger? I turned back around. Let's go. They walked me down into the rain. I sat in the back of the patrol car and watched the yellow streetlights smear across the wet window. That's when my brain finally switched back on. And the strange thing is, the first thing it did wasn't panic. It was arithmetic. Both knees shattered. Ligaments torn. Tibia fractured. It didn't matter if you flew in the best orthopedic surgeon in the country, she was never going to walk again. A wheelchair would be the good outcome. A mercy, even. Then me. Assault with a weapon, permanent disabling injury, they'd charge me with assault in the 1st degree. But I had no record, and I'd walked in on my husband in bed with my best friend. A good lawyer could bring it down to assault too. 3, maybe 4 years. I could survive that. 4 years of mine. For the rest of hers, in a chair. Worth it? I leaned my head against the glass and watched the city slide by through the rain. Worth it. More than worth it. But prison alone wasn't enough. Prison was my price to pay. Hers I hadn't finished calculating yet. The interview room at the station was small. 2 detectives across the table from me. One young, one older. The older one flipped through the report without looking up. Let's confirm this again. You admit that tonight, in your own home, you struck Tracy in both legs with a baseball bat? I admit it. How many times? 6. Where? Both knees. Both shins. The younger detective, a woman, watched me with something complicated in her eyes. I think it bothered her how calm I was. Motive? I came home and found her in bed with my husband, the scratch of a pen. Was any of this premeditated? No. It happened in the moment. That was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. The bat was by the door. Picking it up took 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, I wasn't planning anything you don't plan a breaker, tripping in your own skull. But I wasn't lying either. I signed the statement, and they took me to the King County Jail. The steel door closed behind me with a sound that went straight through my teeth. A few of the women in the holding cell sized me up when I came in, then went back to whatever they were doing. I found a corner and sat down, leaned my head against the wall, and closed my eyes. What played on a loop in my head wasn't Tracy's twisted face or Tom's shouting. It was 3 years earlier. My wedding day. Tracy in her dress, patting my shoulder. He's so handsome. You be good to him now, you hear? I'd laughed and clinked my glass against hers. Looking back, that toast was a waste of good champagne. The lawyer came the next morning. She was from the firm my company kept on retainer, a woman in her mid-30s named Sarah, glasses, sharp, no wasted motion. The injury assessment isn't back yet, but from what I'm seeing, this is almost certainly going to come in as serious bodily harm. The prosecutor's likely to charge assault in the 1st degree. The good news is, I have room to work. You've got no record, and this was a heat-of-the-moment discovery of infidelity. I'm confident I can get it knocked down to assault too. And if you're willing to show remorse, offer to cover her medical costs, the state might go softer still. We could be looking at a little over 2 years. Sarah, I cut her off. You've got the wrong idea. I didn't hire you to get me the lightest possible sentence. She stopped. I looked her dead in the eye. I broke the law. I'm going to prison. I'm not running from that. But I will not spend a single dollar of money I earned with my own sweat keeping the woman who put a knife in my back comfortable, and I will not get on my knees and beg anyone for a few extra months of freedom. What I want is simple. Go on. 1. Plead it to assault 2. Take the standard sentence, whatever it is. No settlement to buy leniency. 2. Refuse every civil offer from her side. They will not get 1 cent out of me through a courtroom. 3. I need you to do something for me. What's that? I've got a house, cash, and my shares in the logistics company. Call it $800,000 total. Before the court hands down a sentence, I want all of it moved into an irrevocable trust. Set it up in Nevada. Somewhere a Washington court can't reach. I don't want to leave her a single dollar for her medical bills. Sarah's pen stopped moving. She looked up. You understand the risk. If her family sues for damages, they can argue fraudulent transfer, that you moved the assets to dodge an obligation and try to get a court to unwind it. I understand. But a Nevada trust is hard to crack. Her family is already drowning in hospital bills. They don't have the money or the stomach for years of cross-state litigation just to pry that trust open. I only need it out of reach long enough. Sarah set the pen down, took off her glasses, and pinched the bridge of her nose. You've thought this through. I thought it through the second I picked up the bat. I leaned back in the chair, and my voice came out level. She's never walking again. That part is already decided. But if she gets a compensation payout, everything changes. Money buys a good rehab facility, a private nurse, a flight to Germany for surgery. I don't want that ending for her. I want her to wake up every single morning, look down at those two dead legs, and remember who did it and why. And then sit in that chair until the day she dies. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Understood. I'll get it done. Before she left, she turned back. The trust, who's the beneficiary? Whose name does it go in? I thought about it. My parents had passed 3 years earlier. I had no brothers or sisters, and a face surfaced in my mind. A boy who, from the time we were small, was always trailing a step or two behind me. Gentle eyes, a shy, apologetic sort of smile. Quiet. Charlie, the boy from the house next door, the one my mother had loved best when she was alive. We'd grown up in the same neighborhood, walked home together every day from kindergarten straight through high school. Then I went away to college, and he stayed in Seattle and studied to be a teacher. When I got married, he came to the wedding, sat quietly in a corner, ate his dinner, and went home. Charlie Reeve, I said. I'll give you his number. Ask him to come see me. 3 days later, Charlie came. He sat across from me through the glass of the visiting room. He was taller than I remembered, broader through the shoulders, in a gray wool sweater still spotted with rain. The instant he saw me, his eyes went red around the rims. But he didn't cry. He just looked at me. Why did you do this to yourself? He said. His voice was rough. I smiled. You've changed a lot. Don't change the subject, he sniffed. Sarah found me. She told me everything. Did you really think this through? I did. Chloe, it's $800,000. I earned it. You broke yourself in half for years earning it. I can earn it again. He stared at me, his eyes brimming. I raised my hand to the glass. Charlie, do something for me. Name it. The money goes into a trust with your name on it. You hold it for me. When I get out, I'll start over. And if it makes you uncomfortable, just think of it as a loan, Chloe. My name came out of him suddenly, and it was rock solid. You don't have to explain. I'll hold it for you. You just take care of yourself in here. Everything on the outside, I've got it. I looked at him, and my nose started to sting. We hadn't had a real conversation in years. And the first thing out of his mouth was times I've got it, times without asking me for a single condition. Sarah will call you to handle the paperwork. He nodded. Before he stood to go, he leaned in close to the glass and lowered his voice. Does it hurt? Does what hurt? Your hand. You swung that thing 6 times. I looked down at my right hand without meaning to. There was a bruise across the meat of my palm, gone yellow now. It doesn't hurt. He looked at me for another 2 seconds. Then he stood, and just before he walked away, he turned back and said one more thing. Quietly, but I heard every word. Chloe, remember this. However long it takes, there's someone out here waiting for you. The moment the door closed behind him, I sat there without moving, and one thought turned over and over in my mind. Was it possible that from the very beginning, all those years ago, I had picked the wrong man? A month later, the injury assessment came back. Permanent, serious bodily harm. Both knee joints destroyed, ligaments completely severed, the left tibial plateau collapsed. In plain English, she would never stand again for the rest of her life. The King County prosecutor charged assault in the 1st degree with a deadly weapon enhancement. Sarah went to work, bringing it down to assault 2. But in Zairu, 3 things happened. The first thing, Tom came to the jail looking for me. I refused to see him. He made a scene out in the lobby, saying he needed to talk to me. Talk about what? I had Sarah pass him 2 words. divorce papers. I was leaving with nothing, and I didn't want a thing of his. But he wasn't getting $1 of mine either. Washington is a community property state. On paper, he could go after half. But I'd started the company before we ever married, which made most of it separate property. As for the rest, I attached one condition: sign the waiver of claims, or I send the whole story about him and Tracy to both families, to all our friends, and to his employer. He refused. The next day, the signed papers came back through the lawyers. The second thing, Tracy's family came. Her mother, her father, her older sister. They came to negotiate. Their offer: if I paid $1.5 million in medical and long-term rehab costs, they'd sign a civil release and ask the court for leniency on my behalf. Sarah represented me and handed it back. Declined. Tracy's sister lost it, slamming her hand on the table. My sister is like this now. What more do you want? Take the money? Sign the release? Get your sentence cut? Isn't that better for everyone? Sarah stayed perfectly calm. My client isn't settling, and she isn't paying compensation. Whatever the court gives her, she'll take. Are you people insane? Sarah pushed her glasses up her nose. A word of advice: tell your sister to take the downhills slow once she's in that wheelchair. They tip over easy. The other side choked on it and had nothing left to say. The third thing, the most important one. The asset transfer was complete. The house sold, the company's shares reassigned. After legal fees and necessary costs, everything left over sat inside an irrevocable trust in Nevada, with Charlie as the beneficiary. Clean, tidy, completely legal. There was no longer a single dollar to my name. The court wanted to compel compensation? Compel it out of what? I was flat broke. The morning of the trial, it was raining again. I stood at the defendant's table. The courtroom wasn't large. In the gallery sat Tracy's family and a few of my old colleagues from the company. Tom didn't come. Tracy was wheeled in. I glanced at her. In the 2 months since I'd seen her, she'd wasted away sallow, hollowed out, both legs locked in thick braces, the life drained clean out of her. She saw me too. There was something complicated in her eyes. Hatred, fear, and, underneath all of it, a flicker of self-pity. She actually pitied herself. I nearly laughed. I had already pled to assault too. The prosecutor read the amended charge into the record. That on the 17th of December, at her residence in Bellevue, the defendant struck the victim, Tracy, in the knees and shins with an aluminum baseball bat, causing permanent, serious bodily harm. The judge asked if I wished to make a statement. I said I did. The day it happened was the 3rd anniversary of my marriage. I came home early and saw, with my own eyes, the victim in bed with my then husband. Tracy had been my closest friend for 26 years. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. Somewhere in the gallery, someone drew a sharp breath. That is the whole of what happened. I accept the charge, and I accept the punishment. I'm not asking for leniency. I said it without heat, the way you'd read a shipping figure off a page. That, I think, was what unsettled the room more than any tears would have. People expect a woman who did what I did to be either sobbing or snarling. I was neither. I stood there with my hands folded and told the truth in a flat, even voice, and let them do the math themselves, the $15,000, the 26 years, the maid of honor dress. I watched a few of my old colleagues in the gallery look at the floor. I watched Tracy's mother look at me like she was trying to find the monster she'd come to see and couldn't quite locate her. I wasn't performing remorse, and I wasn't performing rage. I had nothing to perform. I had already done the only honest thing I had in me, in a bedroom, in about 8 seconds, and everything after that was just paperwork. The judge brought down the gavel. The sentence, 3 years and 8 months. A violent offense, I'd served nearly all of it. Tracy's family erupted where they sat. Her mother clutched her chest. Her sister broke down, sobbing. I looked back at Tracy. She sat in the chair with her eyes fixed on the floor, not moving. Those 2 legs would never move again either. Good, I thought. Symmetrical. As they led me out, I passed close by her. I stopped for 1 second. I didn't say anything. She lifted her eyes to mine. We looked at each other for 3 full seconds. Then I turned and walked away. Some debts don't need to be spoken. Both parties know exactly what's owed. The Washington Correction Center for Women sits down in Gig Harbor, across the water. Once I was inside, the days went by with a peace that surprised me. Prison isn't the way it looks in the movies. My unit, at least, wasn't. Everyone had her own business, her own way of getting through the day. You keep your head down, you keep your hands busy, and the time moves. I signed up for the facility's paralegal course, and I talked a woman who'd been a line cook into teaching me a few things in the kitchen. Outside the windows of the work unit, the rain came down almost year-round, the dark evergreens standing there soaked and dripping. The corrections officer over our work detail was named Turner, a woman past 50, not much of a talker, but she gave me a small nod every time she saw me. One day she asked, "You were in business before?" "Yes," she said, "HM," and left it there. Later I found out she'd quietly read my file. She knew the whole story. 3 months in, the first letter from Charlie arrived. Pale yellow paper, written in fountain pen, every stroke careful and clean. He told me he'd changed jobs, quit teaching, gone to work as an editor at a small Seattle publisher. He told me he'd adopted an orange tabby named Checkers, a foul-tempered creature whose entire personality was bullying him. He told me a diner had opened downstairs from his place that served meatloaf, and he'd tried it, and it was terrible, nowhere near as good as the pot roast my mother used to make. The last line said, "Don't overthink it. Just get through it in there. When you're out, everything comes back." I folded the letter and slid it under my pillow. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The letters went back and forth after that. He wrote, I answered. He told me he'd bought a new bookshelf and thrown his back out carrying it flat on the floor for 3 days. I asked why he hadn't called someone to help. He said, "Call who called Checkers. All she'd do is circle him a few times and judge him." I asked if there was really no one around he could call. Those letters became the shape of my week. I'd finish the paralegal coursework, eat, do my hours in the kitchen, and then I'd sit on the edge of my bunk and read whatever had come, sometimes 2 or 3 times over, the way you reread a menu when you're hungry and there's nothing to order yet. He never once asked me about that night. Not what I'd been thinking, not whether I was sorry, not any of the questions everyone else led with. He wrote to me about the diner downstairs raising its prices, about a manuscript he was editing by a man who used semicolons like confetti, about the fairy horns he could hear from his window when the wind came off the sound. He wrote to me like I was a person and not a case number, and I think that's the thing that got me through, not hope, exactly, just the ordinary weather of somebody's ordinary life, arriving in a pale yellow envelope every couple of weeks. I started saving them in order, rubber banded under my pillow, and on the bad nights, I'd take the stack out and hold it, not even reading, just holding. He put off answering for a few days. When the letter came back, it had one line in it. "Get out here fast and there'll be someone." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Something stirred in my chest, but I didn't let myself follow it any further. 6 months into my sentence, someone came to see me. Not Charlie, not Sarah. Tom. I almost didn't recognize him through the glass. 6 months, and he looked 10 years older. His hair was flat and dull, his coat rumpled, his eyes sunk deep in his face. The man who used to fuss over his own reflection who'd nagged me for half a year about a Rolex, sat there now like an empty shell. I sat down and picked up the phone. I didn't say anything. He spoke first, his voice cracking. "Chloe, you have to help me. I can't do this anymore." And then it came out of him, all in a rush, like he was emptying a bucket. After Tracy was crippled, her family shoved every bit of the responsibility onto him, the man who'd been sleeping with their daughter, the one who'd set this whole disaster in motion. So he was stuck in a cheap rented apartment with a woman who couldn't leave her bed, who screamed at him day and night, who threw things, who cursed him for ruining her life. The medical bills stacked up on the counter. And the money he'd been counting on, the company, the house, the numbers in my accounts that he'd been quietly adding up for God knows how long, had evaporated into a trust in Nevada he wasn't even allowed to look at. That's when I finally understood something. He hadn't cheated with Tracy out of simple lust. He'd chosen her, specifically the friend who was a lesser version of me, who always leaned on me, who always stood a step behind me because next to her, for the first time in years, he got to feel like the stronger one. And somewhere in the back of his mind, there'd been a plan. Get to me through her, and then, slowly, swallow everything I'd built. He just never counted on the board getting flipped by the very woman he'd looked down on. "Sign the company papers over to me," he begged, "or free up part of that trust. I just need a little to climb out of this hole." "Chloe, come on, we were married. I was just tempted. That's all." It was a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness. I looked at him through the glass, at that ruined face, at his two hands pressed flat against the partition. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel any satisfaction either. I just felt how small he was. I smiled, very slightly. Then I set the phone down on its hook and stood up. Behind the glass, he slammed his palm against it, his mouth stretched open, shouting something I could no longer hear. I didn't look back. I walked straight to my unit. There are some people for whom even a single word of reply is a word wasted. Time is a strange thing. Try to count it and it drags like torture. Keep your head down and stay busy, and you look up to find a year has gone. I heard about Tracy during one of Sarah's visits. She was depressed, Sarah said. Shut herself in her room all day, seeing a therapist. I said, HM. Not happy, not sad. Just a faint sense of confirmation. Of course, that's how it went. Sometimes, in the long rainy nights down in Gig Harbor, I would think about her. Not about her on my bed. About the scrawny 12-year-old girl who stood watching me split my lunch in half for her, with a look in her eyes that was equal parts gratitude and something else. It took me years to put a name to that something else. Envy. Her whole life she'd stood behind me. Her whole life she'd borrowed from me, been sheltered by me, lived in my shadow. And maybe, the night she climbed into my bed with my husband, it was the first time in her life she'd taken something I had. Understanding it didn't make me forgive her. It only made the whole thing a little sadder. And then it was over. As for Tom, whatever he and Tracy had, it went nowhere in the end. According to Sarah, after that failed visit to the prison, he hung on a while longer and then he ran. All the way to Austin. Word was he'd already found himself a new girlfriend. People call that starting a new life. I call it a dog, running off with its tail between its legs, carrying exactly one thing: nothing. No honor left, no future, and behind him, a crippled woman he'd helped push into the chair. I was peeling a tangerine when I heard the news. I finished, broke off 2 segments, ate them. Sweet enough. It had nothing at all to do with Tom. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate takes a great deal of energy, and he wasn't worth it. Those 6 swings were the last of the energy I was ever willing to spend on that relationship. In my years inside, everything I could do, I did. I earned my paralegal certificate. I read every book Charlie sent, cover to cover. His taste was all over the map. A famous chef's cookbook one month, a fat volume on contract law the next, the two of them sitting side by side like he'd grabbed them off a shelf at random. I wrote and asked if he was even choosing them on purpose. He wrote back that, of course he was. He had a whole plan, master cooking times and times the law, so that when I got out, I could open a restaurant nobody would ever be able to cheat. I laughed out loud. The other women in the unit gave me a strange look that day. My release was set for the back half of March. The night before, I lay on my bunk and looked at the ceiling. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't keyed up. I was just calm. Calm to a degree that surprised even me. All those years, I never fell apart, and I never cursed my luck or blamed the heavens. I picked up the bat. I paid the price. That, and everything attached to it, got sealed shut. Tomorrow, I'd walk out and start again. That was all. A little after 9 in the morning. The paperwork done, Officer Turner walked me to the gate herself. The moment that heavy steel door swung slowly open, the light hit my face. The days-long rain had just stopped. The gray was still hanging low, but at the edge of the sky, a thin seam of sunlight had opened up cold but bright. I stood in the doorway and squinted. And then I saw him. He was standing about 5 steps back from the prison wall. A thin gray windbreaker, his hair a little wild in the wind. In his arms, he held a huge bunch of sunflowers, the stems still crusted with dirt, like he'd pulled them straight out of the ground at some farm stand. No wrapping paper, nothing. Just raw and yellow and enormous. Against that whole soaked gray landscape of the Northwest, those sunflowers blazed like they'd brought their own sun with them. When he saw me come out, his eyes went red on the spot. He was smiling, plainly, and the tears were sitting at the corners of his eyes and wouldn't be held back. He pushed the flowers into my arms. "Hey, welcome out." His voice was thick, but he was doing his best to keep it light. I took them. I bent my head and breathed them in. Sunflowers don't really smell like anything, just a faint green, and the wet earth smell of rain. I looked up at him. Almost 4 years, and it was the same face, but there were faint lines at the corners of his eyes now, and something steadier in him than before. "How long have you been here?" "Since 8, a whole hour early. Was worried about traffic over the bridge." I looked at him and didn't say anything. Under my stare, he got embarrassed and turned his face away, poking at one of the sunflowers with a finger. "What are you looking at?" "Something I missed, a long time ago." He went still. I shifted the flowers to my left arm, reached up with my right hand, and tucked the wind-blown hair back behind his ear. He didn't pull away. He just stood there, frozen, looking straight at me. "Charlie, yeah, you said there'd be someone out here waiting for me." He nodded. "Turns out I could wait too." He nodded harder, and a tear slid loose down his cheek. He swiped it away fast and jerked his face to the side, jaw tight. "Chloe, don't do this to me." Look at me, a grown man, and here I am crying. I laughed. It was the easiest laugh I'd had in years. "Let's go home," I said. "Yeah," he said. He started walking, and I fell in a couple of steps behind, and then I reached out and took his hand. He caught a little on the surprise of it, but he didn't pull back. If anything, his fingers laced tighter through mine. The prison wall fell away behind us. The March wind moved through the evergreens along the road, carrying the smell of new leaves and wet earth. In that moment, my mind was completely empty, thinking of nothing at all. I just felt safe, like I'd walked a very long road and finally arrived where I was going. A place that was mine. After I got back, I stayed at Charlie's place up in Fremont for 2 weeks. His apartment had 2 bedrooms. He made up the second one for me, put fresh sheets on the bed, set a little potted plant on the nightstand. Checkers, the tabby, treated me with total contempt the first day. Chin in the air, one flat look, and then she turned her back and walked off. Charlie said, "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally. She treats me the same way." I asked him why he even kept her then. She came right over and rubbed against my leg. Charlie put his hands on his hips. "Oh, that's rich, so I rank below you in her book." I scratched her head and she flopped over onto her back, belly to the ceiling. Good. Easier to live with than most people. Those first 2 weeks, I learned the rhythm of his apartment. He got up early and made coffee too strong and pretended it wasn't. He hummed off-key when he did the dishes. He kept his books double-stacked on every shelf and swore he knew where each one was, and he did. In the evenings, he'd sit at one end of the couch with a manuscript and a red pen, and I'd sit at the other end with my laptop, rebuilding a client list from memory. And Checkers would arrange herself in the exact middle, like a border neither of us was allowed to cross. Nobody talked much. Nobody had to. After 3 years of steel doors and fluorescent light and the constant low noise of other people's misery, the quiet of that apartment was the most extravagant thing I had ever been given. I'd catch myself just standing at the window sometimes, watching the rain come down over Fremont, holding a warm mug, and I'd have to remind myself that no one was going to tell me to move along. Charlie transferred the money out of the trust back to me. He had all the paperwork ready, not a dollar missing. 800,000, actually, a little more. He'd put it in interest-bearing accounts, never touched the interest, kept the whole thing whole for me. When I saw the number, I didn't say anything. He stood next to me and said, evenly, "Relax. There's not $1 of interest in there that's mine. It's your money. It's all separated out, clean. Charlie, Thank you." He made a dismissive noise and looked down at his phone. Thank you for what? So much trouble. But the tips of his ears had gone red. I used the money to register a new company, same industry logistics. I'd built the first one from nothing at 26. Standing on cold mornings at the edge of the port of Seattle in a coat that wasn't warm enough, learning the difference between a container that ships on time and one that ruins you, memorizing the names of dispatchers and customs brokers and the guys who ran the yard cranes. I'd worked this supply chain for years before I went in. The contacts were still there, the instincts were still there, and starting over wasn't as hard as it should have been. The first month, I ran it out of Charlie's spare bedroom on a folding table, making calls while Checkers sat on my paperwork like she owned it. A few of the old dispatchers took my call on the first ring, said they'd wondered where I'd gone, didn't ask why. In this business, reputation is the only currency that clears. And mine for being exact, for never missing, for saying a number and meaning it had survived everything else. 3 months, and the company was running again. 6 months, and I'd made back what I put in. A year later, it was a little bigger than it had ever been. I signed a warehouse lease down in Kent, hired 4 people, then 8. Some nights I'd drive home over the bridge with the rain sheeting across the water and the city lights smeared gold on the surface, and I'd feel nothing dramatic at all, just the quiet, level satisfaction of a woman who had been knocked all the way down to 0 and had counted her way back up, one honest number at a time. I never told a single client that I'd done time. But I didn't go out of my way to hide it, either. Once, a new customer dug it up somewhere and came to see me, very polite, very careful with her words, saying she wanted to understand a little about my background. I told her, "Of course, ask away." She asked, "That whole thing, do you regret it?" I looked at her. "I regret not saving some of my strength." She blinked, thrown. "If I'd held a little back," I said, "she might still have had a chance to stand up again." The other side was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she smiled, said, "I understand," signed the contract and left. Some things don't need to be said all the way through. The people who understand, understand. As for Tracy, There was still one last coda. About 8 months after I got out, I ran into her by chance at an event, an industry mixer, friends dragging me along, a big crowd. I was standing by the bar with a drink when I turned around, and there she was. She was in her wheelchair, her older sister pushing from behind. Our eyes met across the room. The noise around us dropped away into background. I didn't move. She didn't move. Her sister reacted first, going pale, moving to push her off in another direction. Tracy put a hand out to stop her. Her sister froze. Tracy rolled herself the last 2 feet toward me on her own. She'd wasted away even further, cheeks caved in, eyes sunk deep, all the flesh gone out of her face, more ravaged even than the last time I'd seen her before I went inside. She spoke first. Her voice was a dry rasp, no strength left in it. "Chloe." "Yeah." She dropped her eyes to the braces on her legs and was silent for maybe 10 seconds. Then she said, "Back then, you should have just beaten me to death." I looked at her. "Killing you would have let you off easy." Her jaw clenched, and she said nothing more. I turned, set my glass down on the bar, and walked off. That was the last time Tracy and I ever spoke. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, no wishing each other well. Some stories were never going to have that ending. The harm was done, the price was paid, the book was closed. That was all. Someone asked me later whether 6 swings of a bat had been worth the years of my life it cost me. I thought about it. What wasn't worth it was the 26 years of friendship, not the 6 swings. Those 6 swings were precise. Not one of them was wasted. It was the most unplanned thing I have ever done, and it is also the thing I will never, for the rest of my life, regret. What started between me and Charlie in a letter was, in the end, confirmed in one too. No, not a letter, actually. It was an ordinary Sunday afternoon. We went to buy groceries. He said he was in the mood for barbecue ribs, and I said fine, and grabbed some greens and corn while I was at it. The store was crowded. He pushed the cart, and I trailed behind, the two of us talking about nothing in particular. He told me the publisher had a new hire who never shut up, gossiping all day long. I asked if he liked her. He thought about it and said, "She's all right, pretty easygoing." I said, "You're pretty easygoing yourself." He shot me a look. "Easygoing? I'll have you know I'm extremely refined." I glanced down at the canvas, shoes on his feet, absolutely coated in cat hair, and said nothing. He looked down too, cleared his throat, and changed the subject. At the register, with more than we could carry, he was hunched over his phone hunting for the loyalty code while I loaded everything onto the belt. The cashier looked up at the two of us and smiled. "You two together?" "Yeah, we're together," Charlie said, not lifting his head. The cashier's smile turned, knowing, "You make a good-looking couple." That was when Charlie finally looked up. He looked at the cashier first, then he turned and looked at me. I kept my head down and scanned my card. "Thank you," I told her. Out of the store, walking down the sidewalk, he had the bags in one hand and he tipped his head toward me. "That thank you back there, what were you thanking her for?" "For being right." Charlie's stride hitched for a single beat, and then he kept walking. I caught up and took the bags out of his hand. "Charlie, I like you." His pace didn't change, but his breath seemed to skip. "I know." "What do you mean you know?" "I mean," he stalled and the tops of his ears went crimson. "I mean, I know." "Me too." I stopped for a second. Then I hurried after him and grabbed the hand that was still carrying the groceries. He let me hold it, didn't squirm out of it, just kept his head down, biting his lip, trying not to smile. Not doing a very good job. On the side of the road, in the last of the March wind, 2 people holding bags of groceries, no ceremony to any of it. But the things in life that actually matter tend to get decided quietly, just like that. He asked me once, later, when I'd started liking him. I thought about it. That day you came to the jail, when I asked you to hold the money and you said, "You don't have to explain, I'll hold it for you." That's the moment. He was quiet a while. Then you were slow. I asked him, "All right, when did you start?" He said, "The day of your wedding." I was there, sitting in the corner, watching you stand on that red carpet in your dress next to somebody else. That's when I knew for the rest of my life, I was done for. I belonged to you. I squeezed his hand a little tighter. What I owed him, I would spend the rest of my life paying back, slowly. Sometime after that, cleaning out a closet, I came across the old baseball bat. I don't know how it ended up buried at the bottom of a box of odds and ends. The aluminum was still bright. Just a few small dents. I picked it up and looked at it a while. I didn't feel afraid, and I didn't feel sorry. It was only a bat, the thing that had closed one chapter of my life and opened another. Outside the window, the Seattle rain kept coming down, soft and steady, the way it always has. I set the bat back in the box, put the lid on, and walked out to the kitchen. Charlie was standing there, sleeves rolled up, and he turned around and asked me, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" Real love isn't always warm. Sometimes it's the quietest thing in the room, the man sitting in the corner at your wedding who never says a word, the one who only tells you, "You don't have to explain, I'll hold it for you." It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for anything back. It just stays, and it carries you a long, long way, through steel doors, through the coldest years of your life, all the way to a kitchen where someone finally asks what you'd like for dinner. If you were ever betrayed by the person you trusted most, a husband, a wife, the best friend who split her lunch with you when you were 12 and then took everything when you weren't looking, I hope you'll remember this. The people who broke you don't get to decide what you're worth. Nobody has the right to price your loyalty at nothing. Where they left you is not where you have to stay. Here's what I want you to sit with tonight. Have you ever only understood who truly loved you years too late, long after you'd already handed your heart to someone who was only using it? Because that's the quietest kind of heartbreak. The loud love, the flattering love, the love that wants something from you that one you notice right away. The steady one, standing off to the side, asking for nothing. You almost never see it until all the noise has finally cleared. So, if this story found you, leave one word below, just one, and tell me about the person who stood quietly at your side in a way it took you years to understand. I read every single one. And if someone once loved you like that, without conditions, without applause, send them this video and let them know you finally see it. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe. I'll see you at the next one.